glad you left up the middle part.
You'll have that.
That's one. Colleagues, good afternoon and thank you so much for your time. I know it's late in the afternoon, I know you're tired and I know you want to go home. I have about 9.5 minutes to go, and so as often happens in organizations, so this is really an invitation to you to contribute to a text. I've now been buoyed by the success of the first book, which in South Africa means your mother bought all 5 copies. And so now I'm excited about the next one. And the first one was on systems thinking. And the next one is going to be on one of the other sort of cognitive domain things that I play around with, which is strategic thinking. And so if we take a kind of talent multiplication approach, this is really an invitation to you to help multiply my lack of intelligence on the subject, because I really struggle with it. Every time I work with clients on strategy, I find it extraordinarily difficult. And one of the risks then is that you default to someone's model. You say, well, actually this is very simple, there are only 4 things involved, or 6 things, or 9 things, or 3 steps, or 7 questions. And that is nice, but also leaves them sort of quite dissatisfied. So what I've tried to do is to create a balance between the complexity of strategy on the one hand and some kind of oversimplified framework that allows managers to somehow navigate the process. Certainly I won't bore you with that, and I'm sure I'll score 3 out of 10 for my ability to put slides together. Let me summarize the slide by saying that Kevin's saying 3 is overachieving. The main point of this is strategic disengagement, and I'm curious what your view. If I speak to most senior managers, and I'd say the vast majority of middle managers certainly, and I ask them about strategy, is this alive? Do you talk about this? Do you understand this? Most companies that I work with, and maybe I need to be more selective with my clients, but most companies I work with say, I've got work to do. I'm a specialist. They talk their stuff and that's very nice and they use flowery language. That's not for me. I work here, I come to work, and they can put pillars and frameworks and matrices and supporting themes and all those things together. That's not for me. So that's my premise. They then disengage. They don't look outside the ball, and they look inside their own specialization. And so the concept is really to try to address this observation of mine, which I'm happy to debate with you, of strategic disengagement of managers. And then this kind of random approach, a default to highly operational thinking, which is what I spend my life trying to improve. And so it's intended as an instrument for strategic review on the one hand by middle and senior managers, and strategic formulation on the other for senior managers and executives. And so the context is important here. It forms part of this, what I've begun to call the cognitive suite of offerings, all the thinking stuff, you know, systems thinking, strategic thinking, and I'm not sure if that's the same as strategy, but certainly the thinking behind it. Analytical thinking, innovation, creative thinking, future thinking, and a number of other things, all the sort of cognitive stuff that I spend my life working on because I work mainly with engineers who don't have emotions. And so I'm really trying to position this within that context. What's important here is that I'm not inviting people to write on asking questions about how people feel about strategy. So leadership is important, I get that. But this is not going to be an amygdala-driven book. It's not going to be the limbic system that drives this. This is about the quality of cognitive processing when trying to understand, review, and formulate strategy. And so there's the framework. It's called the InCOME Prescripts framework. What's extraordinarily clever about it, he says humbly, is that the phrase InCOME Prescripts, of course, laws, principles, and so on for income, revenue, but at the same time it's an acronym, which you can remember very easily. In fact, if I go back now, you'll remember what it was, won't you? InCOME Prescripts. And so each one of those letters simply represents a dimension of strategy upon which you are now invited to author something. So there they are, as they say in this universe, in no particular order. InCOME Prescripts, that's the name. It's kind of catchy. It's not like the blue cow or you know, or something like that, but you know, it's got a ring to it. It is better than this name of a lake, which I found on the internet. I know that's a false comparison, but I think I win that one.
Close.
So the income prescripts framework, there are 15 dimensions there. And so against the advice of my colleagues on the research committee, and against my best knowledge of how this is done, I'm now saying, let's open this all up and invite people to contribute. They'll screen themselves out if they don't really know what's going on here. I'm really testing the systems thinking stuff around auto-cohesive self-organization, you know, playing with the boundaries. We'll see what happens. Something might explode. So those 15 dimensions then, there may be something in there that you find attractive, that you may want to write 8 to 10 pages on. And those set against 5 application areas. How many minutes have I got?
That's okay.
4. I'll 7 minutes. 5 application areas. The thing I want to move beyond here is this thing, you know, there are many people in the room working on strategy. How many times do you hear people say our strategy is cut costs by X% and increase sales by Y%? That's the strategy. Which doesn't seem to me to be working at a very high quality of sort of cognitive processing, if you like. And those are the 5 application areas. So those 15 dimensions then, against those 5 application areas. For each one of the dimensions, you can then say, what's the insight, the aha moment? Once I have that insight, what's my intention? Once I'm clear on my intention, what will I do to make that happen? What are the systemic implications? And Stan Eckert, who's just written the other book, has agreed to write something on that. And then what's the investment that's required to make this happen? Not necessarily rocket science, but that's part of the challenge, to not make it rocket science. So again, those 15 dimensions against those 5 application areas, if you like. And this can be done both internally and externally. So you could, for example, one of the dimensions, you could say, let's talk about technology and cybernetics. So now you could say, okay, so for technology and cybernetics, here's my insight, this is the intention, this is the initiative that's going to run it, these are the systemic implications, this is the money we need. Now, what does that mean internally? And what does it mean externally? So that means that practically, if you look at a kind of matrix view, you then have those 15 dimensions on 5 application areas, both internally and externally, which gives you 150 strategic conversations very quickly, which is already overwhelming. So you can see how quickly it jumps from the simplicity of something called income prescripts to the complexity of 150 strategic conversations. You can see also why we are suffering the scourge of strategic disengagement. It's just too much. It's just overwhelming. I work on building this bridge, that's my thing. How that fits into the strategy, well, ask my manager. So what I've also done then is to prepare some dimensions of some key questions on each one of those 15 dimensions, but you're the specialist, you're the talent. So if you want to reject all of that, that's absolutely fine. These are just some guidelines. And so that's applied to each one then of those 15 areas, which we lack the time for now. This is stay with me now, people, because in step C it gets a bit delicate. And there's a number of models that I've worked on that you can think about. Now, here's the proposal. The proposal is for co-creation of a text. You're invited to write on one of those 15 dimensions or one of the 5 application areas. But it's important that you write in relation to strategy. So we're not just asking your general view of things. It needs to be something that serves strategy. The intention is that every manager has a book of this on their desk, and they don't in future say, oh, strategy, it's so complicated, who knows, it's a bit vague with flowery language and pillars. Let's move on from there. So it needs to be done in relation to strategy. What's important here is it's not a compendium or an anthology in this case. You're being asked to contribute to the framework. So the first thing you need to decide is whether you can work with the framework, which I'll send you if you're interested. If you're happy with that, then please contribute. That's important. We want to create something that's at least a little bit cohesive. Not just a collection of random views. Also not something you've written before. That's important. We're trying to create something that's, as I've said, in some way networked. There's an approach here which, as you can perhaps suspect, has something to do with systems thinking from my own background. This says our study concludes that this is the percentage of our customers who will buy from us without any effort whatsoever on our part. There are some benefits to you, and the truth is they're not financial. I'd rather tell you that now so that you don't get disappointed by your £3.50 annual annuity income from the book. Of course, as many people know, if you want to hide something from a South African manager, put it in a book. Never to be discovered again. But there are other benefits. You might work with some interesting people who will challenge your thinking and perhaps help you to sharpen your own thinking. It won't be me, it'll be some of the other people on the process. I've set the bar for the author criteria quite high. Let me just run through this very quickly and then I'll conclude. Is that okay? 2 minutes I have. So the first is that you should have a master's degree. Now, we can debate whether people should have degrees or not, but perhaps not the right debate at a business school that sells degrees and qualifications. So the argument here is you should have a master's degree, preferably in the last 5 years, because that will give you some recent writing practice. Maybe even that's too long. Or you can have a doctorate at any time, because that means you've been talking rubbish for years and you are now skilled at it. Ideally, you should have been in some kind of advisory consulting capacity. So not just training. Showing people your slides is not what I'm referring to here. Ideally, you would have been a manager at a reasonably senior level in an organization, so you have some sense of what it actually is to work with strategy, rather than just your view on what it might be. And so the focus of your work at some level needed to have been some consulting engagement with organizations of 50 employees or more. Ideally, you would have written something in the last few years for popular consumption. I say beyond academic publication because this is going to be on a manager's desk, not a researcher's desk. So it's useful if you've written something in the last few years. And then some additional competencies, the kind of just the diligence to write and you know, being resilient to get some feedback and so on. And so in the true tradition of a strategic matrix, I hope you'll find the suggestion somewhere in the top right-hand corner of possibilities. You are hereby invited to present an abstract for the book, which will be called something like the InCOME Prescripts 5i Framework, a framework for strategy review and formulation. Perhaps marketing can come up with a sexier name than that. The name of the first book was A Horrible Disaster. Systemic Leadership Learning. It's not really a catchy thing. There you are. Any thoughts?
I'm interested in those small books on the table.
Yes, if I had time, what I was going to do is to talk about fairy tales. Sleeping Beauty, Little Red Riding Hood, and Cinderella. I've got a 5-year-old. And I wanted to do that because that's the main reaction I get from managers. They say the strategy is a fairy tale. It's meaningless, it's just simply not true. And I was going to rip out the pages and hand them out, and then try to reconstruct a fairy tale from the parts, which is what I'm trying to do with this book, because I don't understand strategy and I desperately need your help to explain it. Shall we send an email, perhaps with some of these slides, and take it from there?
Yeah.
Were there any yips?
Yeah, the deadline. Shall we agree a deadline? You see, this is already working. I would say 2 weeks. Is that okay? You can express interest in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So 2 weeks starting today. What time is it? Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.